Our next guest is Dr. Jason Allen, who's the president of Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City, Missouri. Dr. Allen, welcome to the Baptist Convention of Iowa annual meeting.
Tim, it's a delight to be with you and our many good friends there in Iowa. Unfortunately, it's virtual this year. I have enjoyed being with you guys in person a time or two over the years, but delighted to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, very good. I remember just a couple of years ago, you spoke at our pastor's banquet, and then you were our main speaker, and I appreciate that. I see you're maybe at Spurgeon Library, but maybe not. What have you been up to today?
No, I am speaking to you right now from a hotel in St. Charles, Missouri. And I'm here for the Missouri Baptist Convention, which they elected to meet in person this year with all the social distancing and COVID-19 protocols we won't expect. So I have some responsibilities here. I spoke earlier. I'll be speaking again at an event later this evening. And so I'm in my hotel room and here visiting with you and have the Spurgeon Library as a backdrop, an appropriate backdrop, but a backdrop nonetheless.
Very good. Well, I'm representing the churches and pastors of the Baptist Convention of Iowa, and we're curious how things are going at Midwestern. And so let's look back at 2020 and, quite a year. And we'd like to hear how Midwestern has navigated all the challenges of 2020.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell you, the year 2020 has been a challenge, and we still have a little over 2 months left to go. And it's just strange how different issues and even personal life events have coalesced to make it a challenging year. I've lost a couple of dear friends in ministry this year who died. As I record this with you today, again, this is a mundane point, but a real point of heart sadness. My family lost our favorite dog today.
Oh, no.
And so you can imagine my children are just heartbroken, and I would be lying if I said I weren't heartbroken either. So it seems like 2020 keeps showing up in our lives in ways that we were ready for the year to be behind us. Most notably, most especially, of course, is the COVID-19 challenge. And that showed up in our lives in a major way at Midwestern Seminary in March and led to us abruptly transitioning to finishing the spring semester online, and then to quickly making plans for the fall that may well have to be online. So if you are on my campus right now, you would see we are having in-person classes. Those classes are socially distanced and with students wearing masks. We are having chapel, but it is very much social distance, and we can only have so many people in our chapel because of COVID. And so we are having residential activity, but it's a far cry from fall 19 residential activity. At the same time, I'm profoundly thankful for the ability to have as much normalcy as we can have, and profoundly thankful for our faculty and staff who've worked so adroitly and our students who have adapted so graciously to these challenges. So what I've been telling our people coming into fall of 20 and during fall of 20, that if we compare fall of 20, seminary educationally speaking, in comparison to fall of 19, well, we're going to live a pretty disappointed life. But if we compare fall of 20 in contrast with April of 20 or June of 20, well, then we can be encouraged. And so we are having in-person classes. We are having a lot of activities that maybe 4 or 5 months ago seemed unlikely, but we are able to have those without having a catastrophic COVID outbreak. We have had some faculty and staff and students get infected by it. Thankfully, we've had no one seriously ill. We've had the spouse of one employee was hospitalized for a couple of days, but thankfully his condition was never life-threatening or capital S serious. So for us, though, then you get into, well, how's the semester actually going? From an enrollment standpoint, we're encouraged. Our enrollment is up once again. And again, that is not only against broader trends in higher education of, generally speaking, declining enrollments in institutions of higher learning, but a pronounced decline in light of COVID. And so we're thankful our headcount is up again, our hours taken are up again, our incoming class is up again. And then look, Southern Baptists have proven themselves to be resilient and sacrificial, even in light of COVID, to the corporate program, where our corporate program is a little soft nationally, but nothing compared to what many of us feared and what many national giving trends projected. And then you have some places like you guys who are generous and are taking steps to even increase your generosity as to what you send on to the national level. And for that, we are very thankful.
Very good. And so this fall, how do you anticipate things in the spring changing? Do you think it'll look like the fall or more progress, or too early to tell?
Yeah, so we think spring of 21 will be a lot like fall of 20. So what the metaphor we've used is in the spring of 20, in March of 20, we had to like abruptly flip a switch to go to COVID, to go online in light of COVID. This fall, we have a dial. And so we have classes that are meeting, again, residential classes with social distancing, but we also have a dial so that any class, all of our classes can go exclusively online instantaneously as needed. And by online, I mean actually interactive like we're doing now, interactive video. And so that way, if a professor comes down with COVID or several of the students come down with COVID and we need to switch it online, we can do that. So that's the nature of this fall. And that's how we anticipate the spring being as well, to where we'll continue that dial capability we have to turn it as necessary as relates to COVID. And we're prayerful and hopeful that fall of 21 can be like fall of 19. And for that to happen, I think we'll have to be a point nationally to where the vaccine is not only there, but sufficiently distributed. Therapeutic treatments are such that we feel good about our public health standpoint, and that we can gather and be hopefully not in a socially distanced fashion.
So talk about the enrollment in fall of 20. Were there any unusual effects of the COVID pandemic on either online or in class? Did the balance change any this fall?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found at Midwestern the last several years, our enrollment has increased by between 10 and 15% a year, kind of that low to mid double digits. And thank the Lord, we are at that again this year. So we are up, again, it varies a little bit week to week, but in year-over-year comparisons, we are up about 12% in hours taken over last fall, which is just a huge position of strength to be in. What we found is at the doctoral level, that's pretty stable. The master's level, that significant increase in online. And the master's on campus actually up just a little bit, which we're very thankful for. And then with the undergraduate program, it's skewing more heavily towards online, and the undergraduate on campus residential format being down, being down kind of high single digits being down. Now with that, and kind of getting to the weeds here, Tim, and I don't mean to, even you get into a deeper level of consideration as to what that means. Well, for us, that really seems to mean that not that we have less residential students, but those residential students are taking more online hours than residential hours in light of COVID. So we'll know more, with each passing week, each passing month. We'll know more retrospectively as we can have the data in and look at it in the rearview mirror, so to speak, and see what God gave us. But in summary, we are profoundly thankful. God has provided, God has met our expectations, God has exceeded our expectations. We budgeted to be down 15% because that's what the national trends were indicating, and we are up close to 15%, so we're very thankful.
Wow. So in 2020, among the things that you've mentioned, is there anything else that you'd like to include as progress that Midwestern has made, or ministry results or goals accomplished in 2020?
Yeah, I would say on the facility front, and God has just blessed us every year with major new amenities. We dedicated the Student Center fall of 18. We would have been dedicating fall of 20 our new renovated library. It's just a stunning facility, turned out beautifully. We're using it now. We'll dedicate it formally in the spring when the trustees can gather in person, Lord willing. So again, we're thankful. God's given us a real sweet spirit on campus. He's given us a healthy financial and enrollment position to be in. And he's given us in the past 5-6 years, year by year, just an increasingly beautiful and functional campus and facilities, and we're really thankful for that.
Very good. Well, looking in 21, obviously, staying in business and having full classes that meet in person is one of the goals. What else do you have set in mind? Maybe talk beyond 21 in the next few years. What grounds do you want to take for Midwestern?
Yeah, so we feel like the seminary is in a position of strength. We're really thankful for the faculty God has given us. We've not talked about that yet. But over the past 6 or 7 years, he just sent us an incredible faculty. And I inherited a strong faculty, thankfully, but been able to add to that group individuals that your viewers will know, many of them. Jared Wilson, Owen Strand, Matthew Baird, Andreas Kostenberger, Patrick Schreiner, Jason DeRoshi, John Mark Yates, Jason Dusing. I mean, I can kind of keep naming names here. When I do, I always think of 3 or 4 people or 5 people I left out. Yeah. But we're really thankful for that. I think for us, we're asking ourselves questions like, okay, COVID was such a profound interruption. It also provides opportunities to evaluate and to reflect. And so we're asking questions like, okay, what did COVID prompt us to pause or to eliminate? that maybe we are best going forward not to reconstitute or to relaunch that. We ask ourselves questions like, if COVID gives us the opportunity to have a 2.0 version, at least on the ground culturally of the seminary, what do we want that to look like? So we're asking, and we have a full day senior leadership team meeting actually planned for next month to dig into these very issues. What are we missing profoundly that COVID is not permitting us to do? And we're realizing, good grief, wow, we really, really are missing this. I think for us as well, there are a host of things we do ministerially that COVID has prompted us to have to suspend that we really are longing to do again. So for instance, our big annual For the Church conference. Well, we couldn't do that in person. Students taking mission trips. Well, we haven't been able to do that in person. Day-to-day evangelistic outreaches that we do on the campus. Haven't really been able to do those in person the same way. So there are a host of things that are culture makers for the institution and that are missiologically and even theologically important for us that COVID has hindered. And so we're seeing we really want to dive back into those and wanting to be able to reconstitute ourselves in a way that we don't just resume the 2019 version, but what is an even better and healthier version of that.
Let's talk more about some of the changes from COVID, but maybe on a theological or an ecclesiological level. Have you discussed some of the trends that either in the culture or using technology or what the churches are doing? We're going to have soon year-long habits that are forming, and I was wondering if Midwestern faculty and staff have talked about tweaking any of the curriculum or any of the teaching to better fit what the world will be like in a more post-COVID in light of what we've done in the last 8 months.
Well, I think the technological capabilities we have are profoundly encouraging. So if COVID had hit 25 years ago, 30 years ago, there was no online. So we just have to shut down indefinitely, right?
Right.
So we're very thankful for the technological capabilities we have now. What is more, we've seen how, especially the interactive components of our instructional model, how well received those have been and how pedagogically strong they have been. So I don't see us doing any less of this. I see us doing perhaps more of this. Yeah. So right now you think about, we have the traditional residential classes, then you have online classes we have, which for us, we're text-based with supplemental video, with discussion boards, but that's not interactive like we're doing. We really see a third category that COVID has really demonstrated a demand for, this type of interactive engagement. Now, the challenge has been, Tim, over the years is if you do this type of engagement with, let's say you have 20 students in class and 5 students kind of zooming in, interactive video, those 5 students tend to be disadvantaged over the 20 in class as far as even the professor interaction and being able to engage them. And so what we're really, frankly, working towards and doing even now in limited fashion, we'll do more in the spring and perhaps even more in the future, is not just like having 5 students zooming into really a residential class, but having classes that really in their entire composition are designed for this. So it's 20 students that are only on Zoom, none are residential, and professors are interacting with them all equally and similarly, and those have been well. So I taught, for instance, I teach every May an intensive preaching class. Usually it's before the convention, the SBC in June. Usually it's kind of mid to late May, and it's a 5-day, several hours a day intensive, and do that in person. And given the nature of it, usually we have 12 or 15 students. Well, this year we had twice that. They were all on Zoom, none were in person, and it was interactive. And I'll tell you, I love that. I think the students loved it. It's not quite the same of being in person, but it is a far cry from being asynchronous, not interactive in the online format. So we're liking that. We're further exploring that. We're launching more classes in this vein for the spring. And so we don't anticipate that demand going down.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, let's talk about, besides the issues for the school from 2020, let's talk about some of the other issues, the turbulence from the racial tension or the turbulence that have come up politically and with the election. Have you and the other faculty talked about tweaking some of the courses to address some of these issues differently after 2020?
Yeah, so we haven't undertaken a formal curricular revision, But I will say this, these issues find their way to Kansas City like everywhere else. And not that we avoid those or want to be insulated from them. But look, this is a difficult time to be in ministry. And you have a whole host of issues. The presidential election hangs over all this, the racial unrest, or let me say this, the racial tension, and the social unrest. You have the broader economic uncertainty that hangs over this. You have the fact we live in a culture of hypercriticism, a cultural moment when there's such a low cost to attack, meaning anyone with a Twitter handle can just attack. They can say things that are untrue. They can intentionally misrepresent. And so you find yourself kind of always having to bob and weave based upon what someone is complaining about the church, about the seminary, or about our culture, about our nation. All that's led social media in many ways to be a dark place. And even the best of social media at times is less than fully edifying. There seems to be a lot of snark there, a lot of criticism, a lot of arrogance, a lot of accusation. And so, we're not immune from that. And so we find ourselves having to adapt to that and adjust to that and to answer questions. And it's almost like the rules have changed in the church, whereas, a generation ago, you can still be criticized, and there can be sharp disagreements, but there was a certain honorableness to that, to where you intentionally would not choose to misrepresent someone. You would try to be fair in your representation. Well, the social media world and all that comes with it has made misrepresentation sport, to where, it's you have to be mindful that people will take something you say that might be benign, but intentionally misconstrue and intentionally misrepresent. So that's unfortunate. So what do? We have to be clear about who we are, clear about our convictions, clear about our mission, do our very best to make ourselves, to not make ourselves easily misrepresentable. And so do our very best to speak clearly and confidently about who we are, about the vision that we have, about our determination to serve Southern Baptists, to serve the church, for the church, as we talk about often here, and continue to do that. Look, the racial issue is particularly challenging because, this is, as has been written and said by others, this is America's original sin. And the fact that you now have a nation that is approaching, not quite, but approaching 250 years old, that still is wrestling with the race issue. And so on the one hand, you have people like myself and like you, Tim, and others who are making good faith efforts to racial reconciliation, want to be agents for healing and for helpfulness, and to be grace extenders to our aggrieved brothers and sisters, and want to do our very best in that. Then you have at the same time come in the conversation unhelpful, in fact, outright unhelpful movements and ideas, things like critical race theory, intersectionality, wokeism, liberation theology. All that's coming at it. And so you're trying to say, yes, we want to promote racial reconciliation. We celebrate diversity in the body of Christ, and heaven will be diverse, and it's healthy and good and sweet when the church on this earth reflects that heavenly diversity. But we can do that, and we must do that in a way that's not theologically compromising, that isn't importing secular theories that, frankly, the more you look at those, the more troubling they are, especially critical theory, that is not importing those ideologies into the church. And so it's tough. And look, I was telling a colleague the other day, we're visiting about these things. I said, look, here's the challenge. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to be pitch perfect on this issue. And it takes a lot of humility for people like me, that I'm a white male in my early 40s from the Deep South. And on the one hand, I have seen racism up close and personal, not as a victim of it, but as an observer of it. And so, look, it's there, it's true. It's tragically common in its occurrence. At the same time, I know what it's like as a white male from the Deep South to see people who are accused of being racist when they're not, and that has its own burden and its own grief and its own frustration. And so trying to balance all of that, but to speak a message of love and of encouragement and of hopefulness to especially our brothers and sisters who are African American, have carried a particular burden in this. It's something we want to do, it's something we must do, it's something we strive to do.
We've had a few pastors who have had some questions about Resolution 9 from the SBC. And I was wondering if you had a comment on that as maybe a follow-up, or what we should do in light of what was approved, or what's our next step in that one?
Yeah, so I have made no secret about the fact that I have and had profound concerns about Resolution 9. And just to enumerate a few of those. But before I get to those, let's talk about a couple upsides of Resolution 9. Resolution 9 has brought to the forefront of our convention these ideologies, which are ungodly in many ways. And again, we're talking about critical theory here in particular, wokeism. And again, there's a little more elasticity to the word woke, so I don't use it as much. Some people think woke just means to be racially sensitive. Well, I want to be racially sensitive, right? And but wokeism actually has a pretty tight ideology behind it that is deeply troubling. So one upside of Resolution 9 is it brought to everyone's awareness what is critical theory. Should we be concerned about this? And there's far more awareness of critical theory than there was in the life of the convention 16 months ago. Far more, and far more concerned about it. So I know of no one, I say this with integrity, I know of no one at a Southern Baptist Seminary right now advocating for critical theory. No one advocating. I know that in the course of the past couple of years, we've seen several individuals talk about ways to employ it or use it, or how does that speak into our racial moment. But as far as people giving unqualified endorsements or advocating critical theory, I know of no one doing that. Now, as it relates to Resolution 9 itself, I think it was problematic in several ways. And again, I think, first of all, the committee members were seeking to do something healthy and good. So this is not a statement of criticism against the resolutions committee. That's a pretty thankless job. And there tends to always be one or more than one angular topics or resolutions they have to deal with every year. So let's be slow to criticize them. That's not an easy job. But secondly, bringing a resolution to the floor of the convention that so few messengers actually had a working knowledge of what these issues are, a very complicated topic, to the floor. That in of itself is kind of it gives me a wince. Okay, what are we undertaking here? That's troubling. Additionally, the fact the resolution itself was so heavily nuanced. Typically, we don't do resolutions that are heavily nuanced. It's something that's clear. The issue of abortion, for instance, or some other issue that's pretty clear morally and biblically. And so we come at it as a convention of churches, and we speak to it in a way that the vast majority of Southern Baptists clearly resonate with it. They might have worded something differently, but fundamentally it's something that they're stating or trying to state, which is very much a broad-based sentiment or concern that Southern Baptists across the board hold. What people don't understand is it's not like these resolutions are floating around for weeks and people like me and entity heads no, we're really not. We're finding out about these resolutions real time like other messengers are. And so you're on the third day or on the final day of the convention in the afternoon where people are packing up their hotel and moving and winding down, and then we have this kind of this grenade with a pin pull thrown there and trying to deal with it. So I don't want to speak too much here as far as being too confident as to suggest I know the will of the people, but I don't think Southern Baptists perceive what they were dealing with there. And the issue is not that Southern Baptists are incapable of perceiving it. The issue is it was a relatively new and alien, not just word, but set of words, and not just ideology, but really constellation of ideologies there. And just we're not in a position to deal with that. Will Southern Baptists in some way undertake an effort in June of 2021 to somehow restate these issues in a way that's clear biblically, perhaps? And that might be a good thing. I thought it was unfortunate how all that went down, the confusion around it, and the fact that I'm now, in October 2020, having conversations with Tim Lubinas about it, and not just you. I got an email about it earlier today from a concerned Southern Baptist. So this continues to show up in my life, with frequency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I have one more question. Let's talk about partnership between Midwestern and Baptist Convention of Iowa. I'd like you to briefly address two groups in Iowa. The first group are pastors who've been at it for a while, and maybe they have a Bible degree or part of a seminary degree, and wondering what the best next steps are for them, not just pastors, but other elders and deacons and leaders within the churches. What does Midwestern have for them? And then talk to the college seniors as well, who are beginning to sense God's leadership for them to be involved in ministry. What's the best next step for them?
Well, the first group, first of all, we have basically every degree completion possibility under the sun. And look, God's call to ministry comes to different people at different times in different places. And so if you're, experiencing God's call to ministry when you're 64 and you don't have a college degree, and God's calling you ministry, well, look, we want to help you with that. And that probably doesn't look like, if you're at age 64, it probably doesn't look like you getting a college degree and then an MDiv degree, and oh, by the way, a DMin degree. It probably doesn't, but it probably does look like you wanting to strengthen your toolkit and us to equip you where you are. That's where things like our For the Church Institute is helpful. That's where things like our certificate programs are helpful. That's where things like perhaps our Accelerate program is helpful, where you can get an undergraduate and MDiv degree together in 5 years. And it's an incredible program. So, though I'm a huge advocate for Midwestern Seminary, as you know, Tim, I'm slow to kind of layer on to pastors a lot of heavy formal expectation, like you have to get this degree or you have to complete this degree or you're going to be inferior in your task. I never want to communicate that sentiment. At the same time, I want to say, never has theological education, ministry preparation been more accessible to you. Technologically accessible, financially accessible through the cooperative program. And never has it been more needed, I think. Even some of these issues we've talked about the past 30 minutes, the complicating times we live in, the cultural confusion we live in, the ethical transformation we've lived in, everything from issues from sexuality and gender to the pro-life issue to how we lead and serve in a culture and community that needs racial reconciliation. There's so much difficulty, there's so much confusion, so much complexity that it's just tough. And it's even tougher if you aren't equipped or being equipped. I would say to the college students, look, I would encourage you to be trained in the Midwest as you're in Iowa. Midwestern Seminary is here situated in the Midwest in Kansas City, and we would love to partner with you. And the reality is most people do minister, generally speaking, in the geographical context with which they're from. That's not ironclad. I mean, some people are from the Midwest, they minister in the South. Some people from the South minister, in the Pacific Northwest, et cetera, et cetera. But generally speaking, God tends to use us, generally speaking, in the broad geography of where we're from. And so if you're from Iowa, we're the natural seminary for you to study at. We'd love to have you study with us and be equipped in the Midwest to serve in the Midwest, but be equipped in such a way for Midwestern Seminary that you have the full ministry toolkit regardless of where God calls you in the future, domestically around the country or beyond the country through international church planting, mission work, what have you. So we're encouraged. You guys know us. For the church is Midwestern Seminary. For the kingdom, Spurgeon College. That broader undergraduate vision to be equipped, whether you're going to be in ministry or in some ways like a marketplace ministry or marketplace mission. So we offer business and cultural studies and communications and various other degrees at the undergraduate level, so that students can graduate from Spurgeon College and be equipped with ministry and some sort of secular degree field as well. So look, we're thankful for the stewardship God's given us. We're thankful to be in partnership with our friends there in Iowa, and we want to be faithful and want to be faithful with you guys.
Very good. It's been great being partners. You may recall when you came to Midwestern, I was a student there and just graduated a few months after you arrived. So I've been able to watch the journey of the development of Midwestern in these last 8 or so years. And I'm so grateful for what God has done while you've been there, and the quality of faculty and staff, and also the facilities. And not only that, the tone and morale and atmosphere is just remarkably different than it was then. And so grateful for what you're doing, and God is blessing in many ways, and one of them is the increased enrollment. And it's a joy to see the increased influence that Midwestern has had on the Midwest and beyond. And I thank you for your role in all of that. And also thank you for your time today and for meeting with us at the Baptist Convention of Iowa in our annual meeting.
Thank you, brother. God bless. God's blessing to you and to the churches and ministers there in Iowa.
All right, thank you. All right, have a good afternoon, Dr. Allen.